Sarah Chen had seen many things during her 3 years working at the Frontier Medical Station on Kepler 442b, but nothing had prepared her for what she found that stormy evening in the crystal caves beyond the settlement. The distress signal had come through on the emergency frequency just as her shift was ending. Most of her colleagues had already left for the night, heading back to their quarters in the main colony dome. But Sarah couldn't ignore a medical emergency, even if it meant venturing out into the violent electrical storms that plagued this part of the planet during the season changes. She grabbed her emergency medical kit, the heavy-duty scanner, and her protective gear before heading out into the howling wind. The signal had been weak and broken, but her equipment had triangulated it to somewhere in the cave system that the colonists used for shelter during the worst storms. The caves stretched deep into the planet's crust, formed by millions of years of mineral deposits that created stunning crystal formations. But they were also dangerous, easy to get lost in, and some of the deeper chambers contained gases that could be harmful to humans. Sarah had trained for cave rescues, but she had never had to perform one alone. As she made her way deeper into the cave system, following the faint readings on her scanner, the storm outside seemed to fade to a distant rumble. The crystals around her glowed with a soft blue light, a natural phenomenon caused by the planet's unique electromagnetic field. It was beautiful, but Sarah couldn't afford to be distracted. The signal grew stronger as she moved deeper, and then she heard it, a low, rumbling sound that made her freeze in place. It wasn't human. The colonists knew about the local wildlife, mostly small creatures that were harmless to humans. But this sound was different, deeper, more intelligent somehow. Sarah rounded a corner and stopped dead in her tracks. Sprawled across the crystal floor of a large chamber was the most magnificent creature she had ever seen. It was easily 30 feet long, with scales that shimmered between deep emerald and gold in the crystal light. 4 powerful legs ended in claws that could easily tear through steel, and a long serpentine neck led to a head that was unmistakably draconic. But it was the eyes that caught her attention first. They were intelligent, ancient, and filled with pain. The creature's massive head turned toward her as she entered the chamber, and she could see recognition in those golden orbs. It knew she was there to help. One of the dragon's wings was twisted at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. The membrane was torn in several places, and dark blood had pooled on the crystal floor beneath it. The creature's breathing was labored, and Sarah could see that it was trying not to move the injured wing. For a moment, she stood there in shock. Dragons were supposed to be myths, stories told by children back on Earth. But here was living proof that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than humans had ever imagined. The dragon made a soft sound, almost like a whimper, and Sarah's medical training kicked in. Injured being, sentient or not, mythical or not, she had taken an oath to help. She slowly approached, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. The dragon watched her carefully but didn't try to move away or show aggression. If anything, it seemed relieved that help had arrived. "Easy there," Sarah said softly, her voice echoing in the crystal chamber. "I'm here to help. I'm a nurse, a healer. Can you understand me?" The dragon's head moved in what could only be described as a nod, and Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Not only was this creature real, but it was intelligent enough to understand her. She set down her medical kit and began to examine the wing more closely. The break was severe. She could see bone fragments through the torn membrane. This wasn't something that would heal on its own, and without proper treatment, infection would likely set in. The dragon remained perfectly still as she worked, even when she had to touch the injured area to assess the damage. Its breathing was steady but shallow, and she could tell it was in considerable pain. Sarah had never treated anything like this before, but the basic principles of trauma medicine were universal. Stop the bleeding, stabilize the break, prevent infection, and manage pain. She just had to scale everything up for a creature that was many times larger than any human patient. She started by cleaning the wounds with antiseptic solution from her kit. The dragon flinched slightly but didn't pull away. As she worked, she found herself talking to it, explaining what she was doing as she would with any conscious patient. "The good news is that the break is clean," she said as she examined the bone fragments through her scanner. "It's going to need to be set properly, but I think we can save the wing. You'll be flying again, but it's going to take time." The dragon's eyes seemed to brighten at her words, and Sarah could have sworn she saw gratitude in their golden depths. Setting the wing was the most challenging part. Sarah had to use emergency splinting materials from her kit, but they were designed for human limbs, not dragon wings. She improvised, using the crystal formations in the cave as anchor points for a complex system of supports that would keep the wing immobilized while it healed. The dragon remained perfectly still throughout the procedure, even when Sarah knew it must have been causing significant discomfort. Its trust in her was both humbling and remarkable. As she worked, Sarah found herself wondering about this creature. Where had it come from? Were there others like it on this planet? How had it learned to understand human speech? The questions buzzed through her mind, but she forced herself to focus on the medical emergency at hand. The bleeding had stopped, and the wing was now properly supported. Sarah administered a broad-spectrum antibiotic injection, having to use her largest syringe and hoping the dosage was appropriate for a creature of this size. The dragon didn't even seem to notice the needle. Next came pain management. Sarah had strong painkillers in her kit, but she had no idea how they might affect dragon physiology. She decided to start with a small dose and monitor the creature's reaction. Within minutes of the injection, she could see the dragon's breathing become easier, and the tension in its massive frame began to relax. The medication was working. "There," Sarah said, sitting back and surveying her work. "That should hold you for now, but you're going to need more care over the next few weeks. The wing has to stay immobilized until the bone starts to heal." The dragon looked at her for a long moment, and then did something that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It lowered its great head and gently nuzzled her shoulder with its snout, careful not to knock her over with its weight. It was a gesture of thanks, unmistakably clear despite the difference in species. Sarah reached up and carefully stroked the smooth scales on the dragon's neck. They were warm to the touch and incredibly beautiful up close, each one perfectly formed and catching the light from the crystals around them. "You're welcome," she whispered. "But we need to figure out what to do next. I can't leave you here alone, and you can't fly with that wing." The dragon seemed to consider this problem, and then it did something that surprised Sarah even more. It began to speak, not in words that Sarah could understand, but in a series of musical tones and complex vocalizations that were clearly language. The sounds echoed through the crystal chamber, creating harmonies that seemed to resonate with the formations themselves. As the dragon spoke, Sarah noticed that some of the crystals began to glow brighter, and she realized that the creature was somehow communicating through the natural formations in the cave. A few moments later, she heard answering calls from deeper in the cave system. "You're calling for help," Sarah said, understanding dawning on her. "Your people. They're coming." The dragon nodded again, but then looked back at Sarah with what seemed like concern. It made a series of softer sounds, almost questioning. Sarah thought she understood. "You're worried about me being here when they arrive. You don't know how they'll react to a human." Another nod. Sarah considered her options. She could leave now, head back to the colony, and pretend this had never happened. It would be the safe thing to do, the sensible thing. But the dragon was still injured, still needed medical care, and she couldn't just abandon a patient. "I'm staying," she said firmly, "at least until I know you're going to be okay. If your people want me to leave after that, I'll go. But I won't abandon you now." The dragon's eyes widened. and Sarah could see surprise and something that might have been admiration in their golden depths. It was clear that her decision had not been what it expected. The sound of approaching movement echoed through the caves, and Sarah felt her heart rate increase. She was about to meet an entire species that humans had never known existed, and she had no idea what to expect. The dragon made a series of reassuring sounds and gently moved its uninjured wing to partially shield Sarah. It was protecting her, she realized, preparing to defend her to its own kind if necessary. As the sounds grew closer, Sarah checked her medical scanner one more time. The dragon's vital signs were stable, the wing was properly set, and there were no signs of infection beginning. Whatever happened next, she had done her job as a healer. The first of the other dragons entered the chamber, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This one was even larger than her patient, with scales that seemed to shift between silver and deep blue. Others followed, each one magnificent and unique in its coloring and size. They stopped short when they saw Sarah, their eyes widening in surprise. But none of them showed aggression. Instead, they looked to her patient, who began speaking in that musical language again. Sarah didn't understand the words, but she could hear the tone, explanation, gratitude, and something that sounded like respect. Her patient was telling them what she had done, how she had helped despite having no obligation to do so. The largest of the newcomers approached slowly, its eyes fixed on Sarah. When it spoke, its voice was deeper than her patient's, but just as musical. And then, to Sarah's amazement, it switched to accented but clear English. "Human healer," the large dragon said, "you have shown great kindness to one of our own. We are in your debt." Sarah found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "You can speak our language?" "Some of us have studied your people since you arrived on this world," the dragon replied. "We have watched your colony from afar, learned your ways, but none of us expected such compassion." Sarah looked back at her patient, who was watching the exchange with bright, intelligent eyes. "I couldn't just leave him injured. It doesn't matter what species we are. When someone needs help, you help them." The large dragon tilted its head, studying her. "This is the way of humans? To help without expecting reward?" "It's the way of healers," Sarah replied. "And yes, it's the way many humans choose to live. We're not all the same, but most of us believe that life has value no matter what form it takes." The dragons exchanged glances, communicating in their musical language. Sarah caught glimpses of emotion in their tones, surprise, curiosity, and something that might have been hope. Her patient spoke up then, directing his words to Sarah. She was surprised to hear him using heavily accented English, his voice rougher than the others but clearly understandable. "You saved my wing," he said slowly, as if testing each word. "I will not forget. We will not forget." Sarah smiled, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "That's what we do. It's what we're supposed to do." The storm outside was beginning to calm, and Sarah knew she would need to return to the colony soon. Her absence would be noticed, and there would be questions she wasn't sure she was ready to answer. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "But I need to check on your wing in a few days. The splint will need adjustment, and I want to make sure there's no infection." Her patient looked at the other dragons, and they had a brief conversation in their musical language. Then he turned back to Sarah. "You will return, even though you know what we are now?" Sarah reached out and gently touched his snout again. "I'll return. I promise. A healer doesn't abandon their patients." As she gathered her medical kit and prepared to leave, the large dragon approached her one more time. "Human Sarah Chen," it said, and she realized it had somehow learned her name. "You have shown us something unexpected today. Perhaps our people should know of each other." Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure what that would mean for the future. Perhaps they should. As she made her way back through the crystal caves toward the colony, Sarah's mind was spinning with everything that had happened. She had just made first contact with an intelligent alien species, provided medical care to a dragon, and possibly changed the course of human-dragon relations forever. But more than that, she had done what felt right. She had seen a creature in pain and had helped, regardless of the species barrier between them. It was a moment that would define not just her own future, but possibly the future of two entire civilizations. The storm had passed completely by the time she emerged from the caves, and the twin moons of Kepler 442b were beginning to rise over the horizon. Sarah looked back at the cave entrance once more, thinking of her new patient and his remarkable people. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions to make about what to tell the colony authorities and how to protect the secret she now carried. But tonight, she was simply a nurse who had done her job and saved a life. And somewhere in the depths of the crystal caves, a dragon lay resting peacefully with a properly set wing, his trust in the compassion of humans forever changed by the actions of one small woman who had seen beyond the differences between their species to the universal need for healing and care. 3 days had passed since Sarah's encounter in the crystal caves, and she found herself constantly distracted during her regular duties at the medical station. Every patient she treated, every routine procedure she performed seemed pale in comparison to the memory of those intelligent golden eyes and the trust they had shown her. She had managed to avoid questions about her late return that night by claiming she had taken shelter from the storm in the outer caves and waited it out. Most of her colleagues accepted the explanation without much thought. Electrical storms on Kepler 442b were dangerous, and taking shelter was standard protocol. But Director Martinez had seemed more suspicious, and Sarah caught him watching her with calculating eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. She would need to be more careful. The morning of the 4th day brought an excuse she couldn't ignore. Dr. Williams, the station's senior physician, assigned her to update the colony's xenobiology database with information about local flora that had medicinal properties. It was routine work that required her to venture out to various locations around the settlement to collect samples and data. Sarah's heart raced as she realized this would give her the perfect cover to return to the crystal caves. She packed her standard field collection kit along with additional medical supplies, claiming she wanted to be prepared for any emergencies during her solo expedition. No one questioned her thoroughness. It was part of what made her such a respected member of the medical team. The journey to the caves took her through the settlement's agricultural sector, where the colonists had established thriving farms using modified earth crops and some native plants they had discovered to be edible. The farmers waved as she passed, and she waved back, all while her mind was focused on what she might find when she reached her destination. As she approached the cave entrance, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. There were subtle changes to the area around the opening. The crystal formations seemed more organized, almost arranged in patterns, and there were smooth pathways worn into the rock that hadn't been there before. The dragons had been busy. She entered the caves with her scanner active, both to maintain the appearance of conducting her assigned research and to monitor for any signs of the dragon's presence. The deeper chambers registered on her equipment as having unusual electromagnetic readings, far more complex than the simple crystal formations should have produced. As she made her way through the tunnels toward the chamber where she had first encountered her patient, Sarah heard the familiar musical tones of dragon speech echoing through the passages. But this time, there seemed to be many more voices, and the complexity of the harmonies was breathtaking. When she entered the main chamber, Sarah stopped in amazement. What had been a simple crystal cave 4 days ago had been transformed into something extraordinary. The crystal formations had been carefully shaped and arranged to create a natural amphitheater, with flowing lines that seemed to direct both sound and light throughout the space. But more remarkable than the changes to the cave itself were its occupants. Where she had met perhaps 6 dragons on her first visit, there were now dozens of them, each one magnificent and unique. They filled the chamber with their presence, their scales creating a shifting display of colors that reflected and refracted through the crystals. At the center of it all, resting on what could only be described as a throne carved from a single massive crystal, was her patient. His wing was still splinted and supported, but he looked far more alert and comfortable than when she had left him. The conversation stopped as the dragons noticed her arrival, and dozens of ancient, intelligent eyes turned to focus on her. For a moment, Sarah felt overwhelmed by the weight of their attention. But then her patient raised his great head and spoke, his English clearer and more confident than it had been during their first meeting. "Sarah Chen, healer of humans," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "You have returned as you promised. Your honor brings credit to your species." Sarah moved forward, aware that she was being observed and evaluated by every dragon present. She had no idea what kind of gathering this was, or what her presence might mean to them, but her focus remained on her patient's medical needs. "I came to check on your wing," she said, setting down her equipment. "How has the pain been? Any signs of infection or problems with the splinting?" The dragon she now thought of as her patient seemed amused by her single-minded focus on his medical condition. "The pain is much improved, thanks to your healing arts. But there are other matters we should discuss." As Sarah approached to examine the wing, she became aware that the other dragons were arranging themselves in a complex pattern around the chamber. It reminded her of formal ceremonies she had seen in human cultures, organized, deliberate, and filled with significance she didn't understand. The large dragon who had spoken English during her first visit approached from her left. She now noticed that his scales held patterns that seemed almost like writing, and there was an aura of authority about him that the others clearly respected. "Human healer," he said formally. "I am Thyros, speaker for this gathering. What you have done here has implications that reach far beyond the healing of a single wing." Sarah looked up from her examination of the splint, which was holding well and showing good signs of healing. "Implications?" Thyros exchanged a glance with her patient before continuing. "When we observed your people's arrival on this world, we had many debates about whether we should make contact. Some argued that humans were too aggressive, too quick to claim dominance over others. But others believed that your species might be different from what our ancient records suggested." "Ancient records?" Sarah asked, carefully adjusting one of the splint's supports. "You've encountered humans before." "Not directly," Thyros replied, "but we dragons are an old people, and we have traveled among the stars for longer than your species has existed. We have observed many worlds, many civilizations. Most young species are predictable in their patterns." Sarah finished her examination and sat back, satisfied that the wing was healing properly. "And what patterns did you expect from humans?" Her patient answered this time, his voice thoughtful. "Conquest, exploitation, the assumption that intelligence like yours must naturally dominate intelligence like ours. But you—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "You saw a wounded being and sought only to heal. You asked for nothing in return, claimed no territory, made no demands." "That's just basic decency," Sarah said, genuinely confused by their surprise. "Any nurse would have done the same thing." The dragons exchanged glances, and Sarah caught hints of their musical language passing between them. Rapid, complex communications that seemed to carry layers of meaning she couldn't begin to understand. Thyros spoke again. "This is what intrigues us, Sarah Chen. You believe that any of your kind would have acted as you did. But in our experience, Such selfless compassion is rare among intelligent species, especially toward those they perceive as different or potentially dangerous. Sarah considered this as she repacked her medical supplies. I suppose I can't speak for all humans. We're not perfect as a species. But most of the people I know, especially those in the medical field, would help someone who needed it, regardless of what they looked like. And this is why, her patient said, we have decided to take a great risk. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, the chamber began to change around them. The crystals started glowing more brightly, and she could feel a subtle vibration in the air that seemed to resonate in her bones. The dragons began to sing, if it could be called singing, creating harmonies that seemed to unlock something fundamental in the crystal formations themselves. The walls of the chamber became transparent, revealing vast passages and chambers that extended far deeper into the planet than Sarah had imagined possible. And in those chambers, she could see hundreds, perhaps thousands, of dragons going about their daily lives in a civilization that was clearly ancient and sophisticated. By the stars, Sarah whispered, staring at the revealed city in wonder. Welcome, Thyros said formally, to the true heart of Kepler 442b. Welcome to Draconis Prime, hidden capital of the Dragon Empire that spans 17 star systems. Sarah's legs felt weak, and she had to sit down on a convenient crystal formation. Empire? 17 star systems? Her patient, who she was beginning to realize might be much more important than she had assumed, nodded gravely. We are not simple creatures hiding in caves, Sarah Chen. We are one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations in this part of the galaxy. But we learned long ago that revealing ourselves to younger species often leads to conflict, fear, and war. So you've been watching us, Sarah said, trying to process the implications. Studying us. From the moment your colony ship entered this system, Thyros confirmed, we had to determine whether humanity posed a threat to our people or our interests, whether you were a species we could eventually trust with the knowledge of our existence. Sarah looked around at the magnificent dragons surrounding her, at the incredible city revealed in the crystal walls, and felt the weight of what she was being shown. And you've decided you can trust us based on what I did for one injured dragon? Not based solely on that, her patient said, but your actions were illuminating. They confirmed observations we had made about human behavior during medical emergencies, during natural disasters, during moments when your people faced choices between self-interest and helping others. Thyros moved closer, his massive head lowering to study Sarah more closely. We have watched human rescue workers risk their lives to save strangers. We have observed your medical personnel treating enemies with the same care they give to allies. We have seen humans adopt orphaned young from other species, even when those species are considered predators. These behaviors, her patient continued, are not common in the galaxy. Most species reserve their compassion for their own kind, but humans seem to have an unusual capacity for empathy that extends beyond tribal boundaries. Sarah thought about this, remembering stories from Earth about people who had dedicated their lives to helping others, regardless of nationality, race, or species. I think that's what we're supposed to be, she said slowly. I mean, we don't always live up to it. Humans can be selfish and cruel too. But yes, I think most of us believe that suffering is wrong, no matter who's experiencing it. The dragons around the chamber made sounds that she was beginning to recognize as expressions of approval or agreement. But there was something else in their tones, something that sounded almost like relief. There is more you should know, her patient said. And Sarah noticed that his voice carried a different quality now, an authority that made the other dragons pay attention in a way that suggested deep respect. About who I am, and why your healing of my wing has significance beyond simple medical care. Sarah looked at him more carefully, noting details she had missed before. His scales held patterns that were more intricate than those of the other dragons, and there was something about the way he held himself that spoke of long familiarity with command. The way the others arranged themselves around him, the deference in their postures. "You're their leader," she said suddenly. "You're not just any dragon, you're someone important." Thyros made a sound that might have been laughter. "She is observant, this human healer." Her patient fixed her with those intelligent golden eyes. "I am Zephyrian, Sarah Chen. I rule the 17 systems of the Dragon Empire. I am what your people would call an emperor." Sarah stared at him for a long moment, then looked around at all the other dragons watching her reaction. "An emperor," she repeated weakly. "Yes. And 3 days ago, you mended the broken wing of the most powerful being in this sector of the galaxy, treating him with the same care you would show to any injured creature. You asked for no reward, claimed no special status, made no demands for yourself or your people." Sarah's mind was reeling. "I didn't know. You were hurt. You needed help." "Exactly," Zephyrian said softly. "And that, Sarah Chen, is why the Dragon Empire has decided to reveal itself to humanity. Not through grand diplomatic overtures or demonstrations of power, but through the simple recognition that a species capable of such instinctive compassion may be ready for the greater responsibilities that come with knowledge of the wider galaxy." Thyros stepped forward again. "Your people are young, but they show promise. Under the right guidance, with the right allies, humans could become a force for good in the galaxy rather than another conquering species that must be contained or eliminated." "Guidance?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to understand what they were offering. "The Dragon Empire has resources, technology, and knowledge gathered over millennia," Zephyrian explained. "We are prepared to share these gifts with humanity, to help your species grow and thrive among the stars. But such an alliance requires trust, understanding, and proven character." Sarah looked around the chamber again, at the dragons who had gathered to witness this moment, at the incredible city revealed in the crystal walls. She thought about the implications for humanity, for the future of both species. "Why me?" she asked finally. "I'm just a nurse. I'm not a diplomat or a leader. I can't make decisions for all of humanity." "But you can be our first ambassador," Thyros said. "You can return to your people and help them understand what we are offering. You can be the bridge between our species, the one who helps them see that this is not about conquest or subjugation, but about friendship and mutual growth." Zephyrian shifted slightly, careful not to disturb his healing wing. "Will you accept this responsibility, Sarah Chen? Will you help us find a path toward alliance between dragons and humans?" Sarah thought about her colleagues at the medical station, about the colonists who had come to Kepler 442b looking for a new home, about the future of humanity among the stars. The weight of the decision was enormous, but when she looked into Zephyrian's eyes, she saw the same trust he had shown her in that first moment when he was injured and helpless. "I'll try," she said quietly. "I can't promise I'll be good at it, and I can't guarantee how my people will react, but I'll try to help them understand." The dragons around the chamber made sounds of approval, and Sarah could feel their relief and hope. She was witnessing a historic moment, first contact between species, the beginning of what could be an incredible alliance. "There is much you will need to learn," Thyros said, "about our history, our culture, our capabilities, and we must learn more about yours, but this is a good beginning." Zephyrian nodded in agreement. "Rest assured, Sarah Chen, that the Dragon Empire will approach this alliance with patience and respect for human autonomy. We seek partners, not subjects." As the chamber's crystal walls slowly returned to their normal opacity, Sarah found herself thinking about the enormous changes that lay ahead. Her life as a simple colonial nurse was about to become something far more complex and significant than she had ever imagined. But looking at Zephyrian's healing wing, at the trust and hope in the eyes of the dragons surrounding her, Sarah felt that same sense of rightness she had experienced when she first decided to help an injured creature in a storm. Some things were simply the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences. The future was about to become very interesting indeed. 2 weeks had passed since Sarah learned the true identity of her patient, and the knowledge weighed heavily on her mind as she went about her daily duties at the medical station. Every conversation with her colleagues felt like walking through a minefield. Every question about her recent fieldwork research made her heart race with the fear of discovery. But more than the secrecy, it was the magnitude of responsibility that kept her awake at night. She, a simple colonial nurse, had been entrusted with information that could change the course of human history. The Dragon Empire was waiting for her decision about how to proceed, and she still had no clear idea how to approach her own species with such an incredible revelation. The answer came from an unexpected source. Director Martinez called her into his office on a Tuesday morning, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. Sarah's stomach clenched as she entered, wondering if somehow her secret had been discovered. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said without preamble, gesturing for her to take a seat across from his desk. "I've been reviewing your field reports from the past 2 weeks, and I have some concerns." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her heart was pounding. "What kind of concerns, Director?" Martinez pulled up her reports on his screen and turned it so she could see. "Your xenobiology research has been remarkably thorough, almost too thorough. You've documented plant species and mineral formations in areas that our geological surveys indicated were unstable and potentially dangerous to explore alone." He paused, studying her face carefully. "More concerning, your biometric readings during these expeditions show stress patterns that don't match someone conducting routine research. And yesterday, Lieutenant Torres reported seeing unusual lights coming from the Crystal Cave system during his patrol. Lights that seemed too organized and purposeful to be natural phenomena." Sarah felt a cold sweat break out across her forehead. She had been careful, but apparently not careful enough. Martinez leaned back in his chair, his expression softening slightly. "Sarah, in my 20 years of managing frontier colonies, I've learned to recognize when someone is carrying information they're not sure how to share. You've been acting like someone who's discovered something significant and doesn't know what to do about it." The moment stretched between them, and Sarah realized she had a choice to make. She could continue to deflect and deny, potentially damaging the trust that the dragons had placed in her. Or she could take the enormous risk of trusting her director with the truth. She thought about Zephyrian's words about human compassion and the capacity for empathy that extended beyond tribal boundaries. Director Martinez was a good man, someone who had dedicated his career to protecting and nurturing human colonies on the frontier. If anyone could understand the significance of what she had discovered, it would be him. "You're right," Sarah said quietly. "I have discovered something significant, something that could change everything for the colony, for humanity. But it's also something that's not entirely my secret to share." Martinez leaned forward, his administrator's instincts fully engaged. "Are we talking about natural resources, archaeological discoveries, some kind of technology?" Sarah took a deep breath. "We're talking about first contact with an intelligent species, a species that's been watching us since we arrived and has decided we might be ready for a larger conversation about our place in the galaxy." The silence that followed was deafening. Martinez stared at her for what felt like an eternity, his expression cycling through disbelief, concern, and finally a kind of focused intensity that Sarah recognized from medical emergencies. "Tell me everything," he said simply. And so Sarah did. She told him about the distress signal, about finding Zephyrian injured in the cave, about the medical treatment and the gradual revelation of dragon intelligence and civilization. She told him about the Dragon Empire, about their advanced technology, and their decision to evaluate humanity as potential allies. Martinez listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions but mostly just absorbing the incredible information. When she finished, he sat quietly for several minutes, processing what he had heard. "Show me," he said finally. Sarah blinked. "I'm sorry?" "If what you're telling me is true, then I need to see it for myself. I'm the administrator of this colony, responsible for the safety and welfare of 3,000 human souls. I can't make decisions about first contact protocols based on secondhand information, no matter how much I trust you." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She wouldn't have to carry this burden alone anymore. "I'll need to contact them first. Make sure they're willing to meet with you. This is their secret as much as mine." "Understood. But Sarah, I want you to know that regardless of what happens next, you made the right choice in telling me. This is too important for any one person to handle alone." That evening, Sarah made her way back to the Crystal Caves with a heart full of nervous anticipation. She had sent a message ahead using the communication crystal that Thyros had given her, a small, intricately carved stone that somehow transmitted her words directly to the dragons through the planet's natural crystal network. When she entered the main chamber, she found Zephyrian waiting for her, his wing now free of the heavy splinting though still supported by a lighter framework. He was accompanied by Thyros and several other dragons she had come to recognize over her visits. "Your director wishes to meet us," Zephyrian said without preamble. His English had improved dramatically over the past 2 weeks, and Sarah was constantly amazed by how quickly he absorbed new linguistic concepts. "Yes, he figured out that I was hiding something and confronted me about it. I made a judgment call to trust him with the truth." "And you believe he can be trusted with our secret?" Sarah nodded. "He's a good man, and he's responsible for the welfare of the entire colony. If we're going to move forward with first contact, he needs to be involved." Thyros spoke up from where he had been observing their conversation. "We have been monitoring your director's communications and behavior patterns since you told him of our existence yesterday. His actions suggest honesty and genuine concern for his people's welfare rather than personal ambition or aggression." Sarah sometimes forgot how thoroughly the dragons had integrated themselves into the colony's information systems. Their technology was so advanced that they could monitor human communications without detection while remaining completely hidden themselves. "He'll want proof," Sarah said. "He can't make decisions about first contact without seeing for himself what we're dealing with." Zephyrian exchanged a glance with Thyros. "This represents a significant escalation in our exposure to your people. Once a second human knows of our existence, the secret becomes much more difficult to contain." "I understand that," Sarah replied. "But if you're serious about an alliance with humanity, you're going to have to trust someone in authority eventually. Director Martinez is probably the best choice on this planet." After a long moment, Zephyrian nodded slowly. "Very well. Bring your director to us tomorrow evening." "But Sarah—" His voice carried a note of gravity that made her pay close attention. "You should know that there are members of our council who still believe that contact with humans is premature. They argue that your species is too young, too unpredictable, too prone to violence and conquest." "And what do you believe?" "I believe that you mended my broken wing without asking who I was or what I could offer you in return. But I am only one voice, even if it is the voice of an emperor. Your director's reaction to meeting us may determine not just the future of this colony, but the future of human-dragon relations for generations to come." The weight of that responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders like a heavy cloak, but she accepted it. Some moments in history required ordinary people to step up and become something more than they had ever imagined they could be. The next evening, Sarah led Director Martinez through the crystal caves toward the main chamber. She had prepared him as much as possible for what he was about to see, but she knew that no amount of description could truly ready someone for their first sight of dragons. Martinez had brought a small recording device and his portable scanner, standard protocol for any first contact situation according to colonial administration guidelines. Sarah was amused to realize that those guidelines had probably never anticipated a situation quite like this one. As they approached the chamber, the familiar sounds of dragon conversation echoed through the passages. But tonight, there seemed to be more voices than usual, and the musical harmonies carried an undertone of tension that made Sarah nervous. When they entered the main chamber, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The space was filled with dragons, far more than she had ever seen gathered in one place. They were arranged in formal ranks around the perimeter of the chamber, with Zephyrian at the center on his crystal throne. It looked like a formal court assembly. Martinez stopped dead in his tracks, his scanner falling from nerveless fingers to clatter on the crystal floor. For a long moment he simply stared at the magnificent beings arrayed before him, his mouth hanging open in shock. Zephyrian rose from his throne, his movements fluid and graceful despite the healing wing. "Director Martinez of the Kepler colony," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I am Zephyrian, first wing of the Dragon Empire. Welcome to our world." To his credit, Martinez recovered quickly from his initial shock. Years of administrative experience had taught him how to function in unexpected situations, even if none of them had been quite this unexpected. "Emperor Zephyrian," he replied, inclining his head in a respectful nod. "I'm honored to meet you, though I admit I'm still processing the reality of your existence." "As we have been processing the reality of yours," Thyros said from his position near the throne. "Your people are younger than we initially calculated, but you show promise." Martinez looked around the chamber, taking in the incredible architecture and the dozens of ancient, intelligent eyes watching his every move. "Sarah tells me you've been observing our colony since we arrived. May I ask what conclusions you've drawn about humanity?" There was a stir among the assembled dragons, and Sarah caught fragments of their musical language passing between them. The tension in the chamber was palpable. A dragon she hadn't seen before, one with scales that seemed to shift between black and deep red, stepped forward from the ranks. When it spoke, its voice carried an edge that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Human administrator," the new dragon said in heavily accented English. "I am Maltheos of the War Council. My conclusion is that your species is too dangerous to be trusted with knowledge of our existence, much less offered alliance and advanced technology." Martinez straightened, his diplomatic instincts kicking in. "May I ask what evidence supports that conclusion?" Maltheos's eyes glowed with an inner fire that seemed literally dangerous. "Your history speaks for itself. In less than 10,000 years of recorded civilization, you have waged countless wars, enslaved your own kind, poisoned your birth world, and spread across space with an appetite for conquest that knows no limits." "You're not wrong about our history," Martinez admitted, his voice steady despite the accusation. "Humans have done terrible things to each other and to our environment. But we've also done remarkable things. We've created art and music and literature. We've developed medicine and technology to heal and help. We've reached across the void between stars to explore and learn." "Pretty words," Maltheos replied dismissively. "But when faced with a species more powerful than yourselves, how long before human nature reasserts itself? How long before you decide that dragons are a threat to be eliminated rather than allies to be cherished?" Sarah felt her heart sink as she listened to the exchange. This was exactly what she had feared, that human history would overshadow any evidence of human potential. But Martinez surprised her with his response. "You want to know what I think about human nature?" he asked, his voice gaining strength. "I think you're looking at it right now. Sarah discovered one of your people injured and alone in a cave. She didn't know who he was, didn't know what he represented, didn't know if helping him might put her own life in danger. But she helped anyway because that's what humans do when we're at our best. He gestured toward Sarah, who felt herself blushing under the attention of the entire chamber. You want evidence of human character? There it is, a nurse who saw suffering and chose to heal, asking nothing in return. That's not an aberration in human behavior, that's what we aspire to be. Zephyrian had been listening to this exchange with apparent interest, his golden eyes moving between the speakers. Now he spoke up, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of imperial authority. Maltheos raises valid concerns about human history and potential for violence, but Director Martinez speaks to human potential for growth and compassion. The question before us is which aspect of human nature will dominate as your species matures. He looked directly at Martinez, and Sarah could see the weight of the Emperor's attention affecting the director just as it had affected her. What you decide to do with the knowledge of our existence will serve as a test of that potential, Zephyrian continued. We are prepared to offer humanity alliance, advanced technology, and guidance in navigating the complex politics of galactic civilization. But such gifts come with tremendous responsibility. Martinez nodded slowly. What kind of responsibility? Thyros answered this time. The responsibility to use such gifts wisely, to grow as a species rather than simply becoming more efficient at conquest, to prove that humans can be trusted with the power to affect the fate of entire star systems. And if we prove unworthy of that trust? The chamber fell silent, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at the implications of the question. Maltheos smiled, an expression that was distinctly predatory on a dragon's face. Then the Dragon Empire will take whatever steps are necessary to protect the galaxy from another aggressive young species with advanced technology. The threat was clear, even if it was diplomatically phrased. Humanity was being offered a chance to join galactic civilization, but the alternative was isolation, or worse. Martinez considered this for a long moment, and Sarah could see him weighing the incredible opportunity against the enormous risks. If we accept this alliance, he said finally, how would it work? We're talking about a fundamental change in humanity's understanding of our place in the universe. Zephyrian's expression seemed to lighten slightly. Gradually and with great care. We would begin by sharing certain technologies that would help your colony become self-sufficient. Clean energy, advanced medical techniques, improved methods of terraforming and agriculture. In exchange for proof that humans can handle such knowledge responsibly, that you can grow and change rather than simply becoming more dangerous. Martinez looked around the chamber once more, taking in the assembled dragons and the incredible civilization they represented. Then he looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. On behalf of the Kepler colony, Martinez said formally, I accept your offer of alliance, but I want to make something clear from the beginning. We want to be partners, not junior subjects. Humanity may be young, but we're not children to be guided and controlled. Zephyrian's laughter was a sound like distant thunder, but there was genuine amusement in it rather than mockery. Spoken like a true ally rather than a supplicant. This bodes well for future relations. Thyros stepped forward with what appeared to be a crystal tablet in his claws. The formal treaties will take time to negotiate, but this document outlines the basic framework for our alliance: technology transfer schedules, cultural exchange protocols, mutual defense agreements. As Martinez accepted the tablet and began to examine its contents, Sarah felt a profound sense of relief wash over her. The terrible weight of carrying such an enormous secret alone was finally lifting from her shoulders. But more than that, she felt hope. Hope for the future of humanity among the stars. Hope for the incredible advances that dragon technology could bring to human civilization. And hope that her simple act of healing an injured creature had helped open the door to wonders beyond imagination. Zephyrian approached her as the formal negotiations continued around them. How do you feel about becoming humanity's first ambassador to the Dragon Empire? He asked quietly. Sarah looked up at him, this magnificent being whose trust she had earned through nothing more than doing what felt right. Terrified, she admitted, but honored, and determined to prove that your faith in humanity isn't misplaced. I believe it will not be, Zephyrian replied. After all, you mended a dragon's broken wing not knowing he was an emperor. If that is not evidence of humanity's potential for greatness, I cannot imagine what would be. As the chamber filled with the sounds of two species taking their first steps toward a shared future, Sarah thought about how her life had changed from the moment she heard that distress signal in the storm. She had been a simple colonial nurse then, focused on the daily routine of helping colonists adapt to life on a frontier world. Now she was an ambassador to an empire that spanned 17 star systems, charged with helping to guide humanity's first steps into galactic civilization. The transformation seemed impossible, but then again, so had the idea of dragons living in crystal caves just a few weeks ago. The future stretched out before them all, full of possibilities that neither species had dared imagine alone. And it had all begun with one human who saw a creature in pain and chose to help, regardless of the consequences. Sarah smiled as she watched Martinez and Thyros negotiating the terms of humanity's membership in galactic civilization. Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion had the largest consequences. Sometimes all it took to change the universe was one person willing to mend a broken wing. The age of human-dragon alliance had begun, and Sarah Chen, the nurse who had started it all with a simple act of healing, would help guide both species toward a future brighter than either could have achieved alone.